Hello, I'm Wanda Jaggers, a first grade teacher in Louisville, Kentucky, and this is Dr. Amy Seeley Flint, a professor at the University.
And thank you so much for coming today. We are excited to share with you some of the really fantastic work that's happening in Wanda's classroom. And I'm going to get us started by sharing our screen, and we will go from there. So our presentation today is titled, I Am, Therefore We Are, How Stories Shape a Classroom Community. And we're going to start today with a vignette from Wanda's classroom. So in the fall, Wanda had put together a collection of children's literature that was really focused on identity and personal names. And these titles included things like Looking Like Me, The Best Part of Me, Thunderboy Jr., The Name Jar, all of these stories that bring together understandings around identity and culture and race. And so Wanda engages the children in interactive read-alouds, where she and the students are reading through these texts, sharing ideas and understandings and asking questions. And then later, the children have opportunities to move to their writing workshop tables and engage in some writing in their writer's notebooks around the ideas that they had just talked about in the interactive read aloud or other ideas that they may be thinking of. And so, and on one particular fall afternoon, Aisha and Rihanna are sitting together at their table, and they are talking about the story When You Are Five. And so Ms. Jaggers had just finished reading the story and asking children to think about times when they were five, because they had just turned 6 or 7 that year, and so it wasn't too much of a distant past. And so as Rihanna and Aisha are talking, they begin to talk about how when Rihanna went to the beach when she was 5, Aisha says that when she was 5, she was a girl and that she was proud. And the girls go on to talk about princesses. They talk about their hair, the bows and clips and braids that they have. And so then later in the day, Ms. Jaggers or Wanda brings the class back together, and they're asked to share some ideas from their notebooks. And Aisha turns to her classmates and she points to her picture and she says, "See, that's me. I'm proud." Her picture is a self-portrait.
A little bit more about how Dr. Flint and I came to work together. We were both a part of the Kentucky Reading Project at the University of Louisville. And from there, we applied to be a part of NCTE's Professional Dyads of Culturally Responsive Teaching collaboration, and we were accepted into the cohort. And we began our relationship there, working in my classroom together, creating ideas, and then presenting at conferences around the state and around the region.
And the question that we're going to focus in on today's presentation is one that Wanda and I have been thinking about throughout our partnership. And we wondered how stories and discussions in her classroom really fostered learning. How did it foster identity and agency?
A little bit more about the school. I work at Allendale, which has 400 students who, as a school, we are deemed low performing based on state assessment and state rubrics. We have a U of L signature partnership, which means that our building is very lucky to have professors like Dr. Flint come in and teach their undergrad courses right there on our campus. For the students and for me as a classroom teacher, that means that we have method students who come in and work with us and visit and learn with us. Specifically in my classroom, I had 26 students, 17 of whom are Black, 6 are white, and then 3 are 2 or more races.
So to kind of give a framework for our talk and the work that goes on in Wanda's classroom, we want to talk a little bit about some of the beliefs and understandings that really underpin all of the work that is happening. And it's this idea of emancipatory and asset-based pedagogies. And when we think about that, we want to think about how emancipatory pedagogy involves a way of thinking about, negotiating, and transforming the relationships in classroom teaching, the production of knowledge, and institutional structures of school. And so these three signature ideas that we have on the screen here, this idea of humanization, is really understanding that we are, that humanity is really at the heart of all that we do. And so this idea that difference does not mean deficit, but that it means that there's just more humanity for us to examine and explore and to celebrate. The idea of critical consciousness is really thinking about how do we act on the learning in such a way that it affects a change, that we engage in transformative practices, that we are taking up social issues and being very critical and having a consciousness around the work that we're doing. And then this idea of problem posing is thinking about being critical and becoming aware of one's conditions and the world in which we live. So what are the social actions that we can take up as learners, as teachers, as people in the world? And a couple of folks who have been really thinking and talking about this have some ideas that I want to just share with you, their quotes. One is this idea that Horton and Freire talk about in terms of what they say around emancipatory pedagogy is that students come, of course, into our classrooms, and that they bring with them, inside of them, in their bodies, in their lives, they bring their hopes, their despair, their expectations, their knowledge that they got just by living. They bring their frustrations, their fighting, and undoubtedly, they don't come into our classrooms empty. They arrive into our classrooms full of things, and in most cases, they bring with them their opinions about the world and about life. And then another idea that I think is really central is this idea that students really, when we think about emancipatory pedagogy, it's really this idea that students are centered as normative, right? That this goes back to the idea that difference is not a deficit, but that students are centered as normative and that they are not outsiders who need to be assimilated to be successful in the classroom. And so these ideas around this emancipatory and asset-based pedagogy really frame the work that Wanda does in her classroom. And in our next slide, we're going to talk now about some of those signature structures that play out in her room. And so alluded to in the vignette was this idea of the interactive read aloud. And what happens in this particular structure is that Wanda reads a book to the children, a title to the children, and they often engage in conversations throughout the text. So the conversation and the discussion is happening as Wanda is reading, not something that happens at the end of the story. And she often has the children do turn and talks or talk to your shoulder partner, just as ways to encourage all of the students to participate. And interactive read alouds are really a signature part of Wanda's day, and they occur 3 to 4 times a week and are really central to kind of her morning literacy time, where it's really an opportunity to engage kids in thoughtful and meaningful conversations. The texts that Wanda uses for her interactive read alouds are ones that tend to be not ones that the children would be reading on their own, because we are in a first grade classroom, but ones that have really important signature ideas that she wants to bring to the larger group. The writer's workshop and share time often follow an interactive read aloud. And so the children have engaged orally in conversations, and now Wanda's asking them to move into their writer's notebooks and compose stories, thoughts, ideas in their notebooks. And so the children move to throughout the classroom, sitting with their neighbors or table mates and just really drawing from their own ideas to put down on paper. So there really is never a signature or a prompt that drives the writing workshop, but that the children are just writing from their hearts, from their heads, and oftentimes working together and sharing across the table. The share time that happens, oh, and writers workshop is something that happens on a very regular basis. Like I said, it generally follows the interactive read aloud, and so we will see kids engaged in writers workshop 3 to 4 times a week. And then the share time are opportunities when children have put together their own books. So it's sort of a published event, and children will write the invitations for their parents to come in and enjoy an author share time. And so we can see a large group of parents in this one picture here who have come in to really enjoy and celebrate the work that their children have been doing. And then a third kind of signature structure that happens in Wanda's classroom that is built on from the interactive read aloud and the writers workshop are what we call these reading invitations. And this idea of an invitation really comes from Harsty Short and Burke's work in the late 1980s, where they thought about some ways to think about how we might take text sets and have some experiences around text sets. And so in Wanda's classroom, she often will have 3 or 4 books that she has put together as a text set around a signature idea. She's engaged the kids in interactive read alouds. They've worked in their writer's notebooks. And it's this idea of within those writer's notebooks, having the opportunity to make meaning around a signature idea, to represent your best thinking at any one point in time, to use multiple ways of knowing to construct and contest meaning. And really these invitations, there's no one way to respond. And so it really values these alternative responses. And so the interactive read alouds, the writer's workshop, and the reading invitations are really these structures that Wanda has in place to further highlight this idea of emancipatory pedagogy. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to share a few of those invitations that have taken place over the course of a year, both talking about the invitation and the children's responses. So one very popular reading invitation that is often sets the stage for the entire year is this idea of working around and understanding our names. So Wanda reads these books to the children, Thunder Boy Jr., Alma, The Name Jar, My Name is Maria Isabel, and has children thinking and talking about how they got named and what do they notice about these particular books. One thing to understand about the reading invitations is that these are often, sometimes teachers will have them as a sort of a inquiry center or a place in the room to engage in the conversation. And the invitation will be like in a file folder where then kids sit around and talk and write. In Wanda's classroom in a first grade, the talking and thinking often happen in that sort of whole group setting, and then children move off to do the small group work at their writing tables. But in any case, so this is a invitation around, what do you notice about your name? What can you say about your own name or something that you have named? And so a couple of examples that we have here are some writing that came about from the writer's notebooks into then a published text for this young child. And she writes, "My name is Corey. My auntie named me. She named me because it was cute and something we couldn't figure out. I know what my name is. I want to show you my name. Here is my name, Corey." So as we can see in this children's writing, there's lots of sense of self-confidence, of self-esteem, of agency. She is proud of her name. She is excited about her name. And it's a way to highlight and celebrate who she is. In this next example, There's a lot of writing going on and lots of fabulous illustrations. And this child writes, "My name." And then on the first page there, she says, "I name you Paris." So that's the mom who is talking in this example. And then she writes, "By Paris." And then on page 2, she writes, "I got my name from my mom when I was born in 2011 on 21. My mom called me Paris. My family loved my name, called Paris." And then on the next page, she writes, "It is a city name, Paris, and my name too. I love my name." And both Wanda and I absolutely love this third page with the child who has um, drawn the picture of the Eiffel Tower to represent Paris, and then a picture of herself as also being a kid name who has the name of Paris. So in these examples around the names, you can see that there's a lot of self-agency and confidence as the children are thinking and learning and writing and sharing. And then in this particular invitation, this is one that continues on from the name stories to move into I Am Somebody. So the children are exposed to lots of texts that address skin tones, race, culture. The best part of me is really thinking about who you are as a whole being. And so as the children engage in these conversations, they look and think and talk about their own skin tones. And so often the kids will put their hands down in a circle and looking at the variation of skin tone that is in the classroom. They'll talk about the colors of the skin tones of their family members. And so there's just a lot of conversation. And if you're not familiar with the story, The Colors of Us, it is a story that brings together food items as ways to think about skin tone. So butterscotch and caramel and coffee and chocolate and peach and all the different variations that we might have. And so as the children engaged in those conversations, they then created what we called identity stories. And these stories were opportunities for kids to just write about who they were as a person in this classroom. Now you'll notice the front cover of these stories are self-portraits. And in this case, what Wanda and the children did was they took large sheets of paper and painted them lots of different colors that would be reflective of skin tone. And then as the children created their own self-portraits, they were able to take all of this painted paper and cut it up and collage it and make it look like who they saw themselves to be. And one of the ideas that we'd like for you to focus in on this particular slide is that as the children moved into the writing and drawing of their inside of their book, we could see that they were very consistent in color choice, crayon choice for their skin tones. So we have DJ on the left who says, "I'm a golden eagle. I'm a big boy and I am 7 years old." And we can see that DJ identifies as white, and he has shown that to be true both in his self-portrait with the painted paper as well as the color of crayon that he chose for his illustrations. And then we have Cash on the right, and Cash writes, "My skin color is brown, like the light brown sugar." So he's picking up from that story, The Color of Us, and thinking about his own skin tone, and we can see the consistency in his choices of colors for his work.
Another cool happening that happened when we were making this were the conversations that the kids were having. So we had a rainy day wellness to stay inside, not get to go outside, and we decided to go ahead and start making these paint colors. And the thing to note is that the kids didn't make the single large sheet by themselves. So Cash and DJ might have worked together to create the blue that they used for their shirt, or they might have worked together to mix the browns. And so I was hearing the kids say things like, "Oh, such and such, could you add a little more brown? Because I'm going to use this one for my skin. Oh, so and so, that one looks just like you," and identifying and seeing each other. And then they were pulling out the the words from the story. This one looks like brown sugar. This one looks like a maple. And just using that rich adjective vocabulary was such a cool experience. I'm going to pause and just think for a moment on some of the things that we've heard. Dr. Flint introduced us to the interactive read aloud, which for me as a classroom teacher is so meaningful. I'm able to ensure that all of my students are getting on grade level text exposure. They're hearing fluent reading, they're listening for the story elements and the other things that I'm listening and teaching for. In the writing time, it's an assessment for me. I love that my students are able to write. I love that they're able to express themselves and all of those rich writing qualities that Dr. Flint talked about in the writing workshop. But I can additionally see at a quick glance, are they understanding text features? I saw in one of the students writing that she had headings and captions and talking bubbles. She used quotation marks. Are they using punctuation, capitalization? How are they hearing the words for phonics? So for me, not only does it have all those wonderful qualities that she talked about, it includes more for me to assess. This invitation is one of my favorites because it really invites me into their world. So it's called the I Wonder Heart Map, and we spend time reading Where Are You From, my map book, and other texts, and just really understanding the world around us. The idea is to pick a couple things that you wonder, listen to your classmates, where they're from, what they're thinking, and how they see the world, and then creating your own. So in the student examples, they were making postcards about themselves. And so the first child writes, I'm from my whole family. And then they illustrated everyone. On the right, the child says, I am from my mom's heart. And then the child on the bottom says, I'm from her street location. So these students all took a different approach. You can see what's important to them. My home is important. This is the street I live on. My family is important. These are the people who I'm from. I'm special in my mom's heart. And so after we made the individual postcards, we wrote a collective poem. And it says, in room 131, we are from Louisville, Kentucky, my dog, the beach, Michigan, God, and the city. And I'm not sure if you can see under it, but the kids have owned the things. They realize, hey, it's not just one person from Louisville. We're from Louisville. So they wrote their names. Or, oh, I'm also from God. So this served as a connection point to help strengthen our community. And then we wrapped it up with a sentence from all of us. We are from hard work, friends, and family, and JBA. So not only did we get to express our world as individuals, but we came together as a classroom family. This invitation is called Creating Beauty in My Community. So we've spent at this point a large portion of the year looking inward, looking at ourselves, looking at who we are, what makes us great, our place in the world, our heart maps, ourself, and now we're branching out into the community. So we're reading some of the texts that are presented there for you, and then we're asking questions like, what makes our community good? And what are people doing in our community? And how can we create things, pictures, illustrations, murals, poems to even improve our community? So in the student work, the first one, we had a guest speaker, Mr. Charles Booker, came into our classroom, and he really, really impacted my kids and also my thinking with the question, what is your greatness and what is change? And from there, the kids went wild. The picture right under that, they created a how can we be heard? So they're brainstorming ideas of how to get our voice out in the community, whether that's the school community, the neighborhood community, or even just our classroom community. So on the microphone at morning meeting, they can talk to leaders and administrators and teachers, make posters, they can protest. They can make commercials. And so they came up with these lists of what they were going to do, how they were going to do it. And then that led us into the thinking of, well, what is change? What will we change? How are we going to change it? And so they brainstormed their own ideas. stopping littering, helping every kid get a library card, um, helping people be healthy and take care of themselves. So, what kind of campaigns could they make? And then the book on the right is from another student. And she said, when people throw trash, it makes me bad because if we make the earth sick, we will not get to do fun things. With trash, it is not fun. Be proactive. So she's putting out that challenge all on her own.
And so, as we begin to sort of wrap up our presentation, we want to leave you with these ideas around this idea of emancipatory and asset-based pedagogies, such as the ones that are embodied in Wanda's classroom through her interactive read-alouds, the writing workshop time, and the reading invitations, that these are really tools that help to mediate the relationship between not only Wanda and her student, but also among the students, and building community as the kids engage in these invitations as a group, as a social, in the social context. And so this idea of the humanization, the critical consciousness, and the problem posing really shine through as Wanda engages her children in sharing stories about themselves, about each other, at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and throughout the year. And so these stories really become those signature events that foster identity, agency, and who we are as learners in this classroom. And so thank you very much. And we look forward to your conversation and questions during our question and answer period following this presentation.